Welcome into the Fantasy Draft Room, and today we are kicking off the AFC South projection series with my hometown, Houston Texans. Hopefully, I can do a little bit better on this one, maybe based upon the other teams, because I have a little bit of insider knowledge, I guess more insider knowledge to this team as they are in my city. I listen to the local radio, see the beat reporters, and follow the team closely and everything like that. But there are a lot of things in this offense that I think are pretty difficult to predict at this point. You do have 2 years of D'Amico Ryans, 2 years of CJ Stroud, but you have a change at offensive coordinator where you've had the up and down year of Bobby Slowick leading to his firing almost from a hiring as a head coach after 1 year with CJ Stroud in his rookie year. So now you're bringing in Nick Caley from the Los Angeles Rams system, who was a tight ends coach and passing game coordinator over there, and bring in again to this offensive line and trying to really help this run game and the blocking game, at least in pass protection and blocking game in the run game as well, to try to get this offense back on track from what we saw with CJ Stroud in his rookie year and trying to get a year 3 bounce back to where more of what we saw in that rookie year. So for this team, we have an interesting path to what we have of really offensive historicals. So we only have the 2 years of CJ Stroud data. We don't have anything for the offensive coordinator with the Houston Texans and with this scheme, but we do have 2 years of what we can use with Nick Caley, the offensive coordinator who's coming in now. And we can take that from the Los Angeles Rams system from the last 2 years. So what I decided to do for historicals for this team is take the 23 and 24 seasons for both teams and then do a average of all 4 of those seasons to try to merge those two together to see how they might kind of combine into each other. CJ Stroud's operation under Bobby Slowick, and then the Rams operation under Nick Caley to bring those two together. So if you're looking at the 6 big stats that I look at for those averages, that's going to sit at 576 passing attempts, 451 rushes, 387 of those going to running backs, 73 targets to running backs, 377 to wide receivers, and 99 tight end targets if you combine all of those 4 individual seasons together. So that's what I really used to try to hone in on where I think this offense could operate in 2025. That's going to leave us with CJ Stroud now at 569 passing attempts. If we're just looking at that really quickly, he had the passing attempts numbers for 2024 was at 532, and in 15 games in 23, he was at 499. So we have a jump up here. It's a little bit higher than I believe what the 17-game pace would be if you put him into 17 games in his rookie year or close to that number. So 569 passing attempts. Looking at his completion percentage, I do have a jump up there from his first 2 years at 63.9 and 63.2%, going up to 64.5%. Passing yards is going to be based on, again, on that yards per attempt and yards per completion. His first 2 years in the league, his yards per attempt was at 8.2 and dropped to 7.0. I have that coming back up to 7.64. Yards per completion was at 12.9, dropped down to 11.1. I have that coming back up to 11.85. So these numbers are not as good as the rookie year, but definitely an improvement from what we saw last year. Gives him 4,348 yards. 27 touchdowns is going to be based on a touchdown rate at 4.6 and 3.8 his last 2 years. If you put that number in, that then goes up to a new number in that kind of averages the two of those together. We then get to the 27 total touchdowns and then do the same process with the interceptions, and you get to 10 total interceptions. Looking at CJ Stroud for the rushes that he looked at for the first 2 years in his career, he had 39 rushes in those 15 games. 52 rushes in 17 games last year. I have that number just dropping down a little bit to 49 total rushes, and a 4.43 yards per attempt is pretty good for what most people would consider, and I still do, a pocket passer. But 4.3 and 4.5 yards per attempt the first 2 years in the league, middle that number in at 4.43. So that's going to give you 217 yards and 1 total touchdown for a position rank for CJ Stroud at quarterback 17. This is just what you're going to have with pocket passers. You're not going over 30 touchdowns. You have under 220 yards, only 1 rushing touchdown. I know you still do have close to 4,400 yards, but you're not bringing that big 4,500 yard mark. And so it's hard for these type of quarterbacks to really vault up into the rankings unless you're just highly efficient in the touchdown game, which I do think they could be if everything clicks right. But I'm taking a more mild approach for this team. CJ Stroud still coming in as a pocket passer quarterback 2 for me. You change around a couple of numbers. This is a really big flat range for quarterbacks. So if you add a touchdown or 2 here, a little bit more on the ground, another rushing touchdown or 2, could easily see him vault up to like quarterback 12, but you're probably not getting too much higher than that. The running back room here is going to be interesting. As I'm recording this, this was the day that the Joe Mixon news dropped, that he's still dealing with his foot and ankle injury. We already knew this coming in, and it had been reported that he was going to be kind of eased into camp pretty slowly. And then probably, I mean, Joe Mixon has not played in the preseason any of like the last 2-3 years before. I don't know what his role was with the Bengals whenever they were doing that, but he didn't play in the preseason last year for the Texans, didn't play in the year before that with the Cincinnati Bengals either. But now they're saying he's probably going to be held out, and they're saying now potentially coming back for week one, or they hope to have him back for week one. And that's definitely a different tone than what we had heard over the past couple of weeks leading up to training camp. So I'm still having him here as the 17 games. I don't think I'm going to react. I can't react over just the one day of news. I want to hear more off of this one. This is just the order of how they're going to operate. I'm not going to push off recording this one. But if you wanted to move these numbers around to get Joe Mixon less touches, increase Nick Chubb, increase Woody Marks, I can fully understand. But for right now, with the information that I'm operating on, and then there's a re-injury risk of Joe Mixon as well with this foot ankle injury that definitely exists. But with the process that I use, Joe Mixon has shown over the last 3 years that he can play a full healthy 17 games. He's probably not projected to do that for the next year, but this is kind of the process that I have to go through and I have to kind of stick to. So for right now, could easily change in the future over the next week or two before we get to preseason games. This is where I have it, though. Joe Mixon coming in at 248 total rushes. Again, if we're looking at that RB rush number, I have it at 390. RB rush number for the averages of the last 2 years for both teams is 387, so that's right on par. Joe Mixon last year the last 2 years put up 257 carries in 17 games with the Bengals and 245 in 14 games with the Texans last year. I have that number coming in lower because of an addition of Joe Mixon at a 17-game pace of still 248 rushes. So lower on a per game, but still just coming in under 250 total rushes. At a 4.2 yards per attempt per carry. His yards per attempt and his career average has been 4.1. Last year, he was at a 4.1 with the Texans, and that offensive line with where it was at last year. I know the loss of Laramie Tunsil is probably going to be a thing that detracts from a lot of people's thoughts of this offensive line. I think that was more monetary than anything. If you're looking ahead a year out, maybe a year too early to let him go. Whatever the case, I don't think anybody really knows what this offensive line looks like right now, except that it's probably not going to be in the top half or even maybe 2/3 of the league, no matter what. But I still have him here just a little bit higher, hopefully with the addition of Nick Caley in the run game and the tight end game for 1,041 yards on a 4.2 yards per attempt basis and 8 total touchdowns. Last year, he was at 11. The year before that with the Bengals, he was at 9. So I have that number coming down in the rushing game for Joe Mixon, coming in at 8 total touchdowns. Through the air, I have him with 55 total targets. We're looking at the target rate for Joe Mixon over the last couple of years. 75 with the Bengals in 22, 64 and 23 with the Bengals again, and then 52 last year with the Texans in only 14 games. So again, the per game number comes down. You add a guy like Woody Marks that they traded a future third to go up and get. He's going to be used in the passing game. I just don't know if Joe Mixon is healthy, and that's a big if at this current point of time as I'm recording this right now. But if Joe Mixon's healthy, he's still going to be on the field so much that I do think he just carves out a large majority of the target share. And even with the little amount of work that I have for Woody Marks as a rusher, it's still a pretty good amount of targets that he's cutting into if Joe Mixon can get 55 targets through the air in a 17-game season. Looking at the catch percentage, 74.55% for Joe Mixon. His career average and catch rate has been 79.9, but it dropped down to 69.2 last year with the Texans. Have it bouncing back up to almost a 75%. Gives you the 41 receptions. For his yardage and yards per reception, I have it coming in here at 8.1. Last couple of years, he's been at a 7.4, 7.2, and jumped up actually last year with the Texans to an 8.6. So I have it coming back down a little bit to 8.1 for 332 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air for RB14. Obviously, a very risky, fragile currently as it's projected with the news that we have right now, RB14, but it's still where I have him for now. But obviously, don't put him at RB14 probably in rankings or projections or anything like that. Not projections. We're doing projections here. But in rankings, I won't have him at RB14 just because of the massive amount of risk that currently surrounds Joe Mixon. For Nick Chubb, I have him at 112 total rushes. Really, whenever we're looking at this, I think Joe Mixon still gets his, but you need a first down, second down, short yardage guy. I think Nick Chubb can really excel in that range, but he hasn't proven the healthy seasons as of recently, and he's still coming off of a pretty bad year whenever he did come off of the knee injury last year. So I only have him slated for 14 games, but 112 total rushes. 3.79 yards per attempt. A lot of this is going to be driven by the last year's numbers where he was at, before 5.55, 6.1 yards per attempt, and then coming back off the injury, dropped down to 3.3 yards per attempt with Cleveland last year. I have it bouncing back, but not getting up into that 5 number. Definitely not yet. He needs to show me a lot before we get back to that type of Nick Chubb, and especially at the age that he is currently now. 3.8 almost for Joe Mixon at 425 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. Thinking he might take some of that more goal line work. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 39 yards, and 0 touchdowns. Nick Chubb's just never been really featured as a target getter. Joe Mixon and Woody Marks are much better at it than him. I'm not even really going to go into numbers or anything like that since it's just such a small amount. For Woody Marks, I know a lot of people are excited about him. I'm not excited about him as a runner. Didn't think he was very good there. He was good as a pass catcher, and I will fully admit to that. But whenever you're just a specialized pass catching only back, whenever you have, if Joe Mixon is healthy and Nick Chubb, I don't see a reason why he's going to be in on non-passing plays that are specialized for a running back to be utilized that way. And so I just don't have a lot of work going to Woody Marks on this team. Unless it's injury, I just don't see much of unless it's a specialized, personalized role for Woody Marks, I don't see much work for him here. 27 carries, 105 yards, no touchdowns on the ground, 18 targets, which is where he's going to excel. It could easily swing a lot of a different way between Joe Mixon and Woody Marks. But again, if you're on the field as much as Joe Mixon's projected to be at this current point, maybe before yesterday's news current point, I still have this gap pretty wide. 18 targets, 14 receptions, 117 yards, and 1 touchdown. Brings the 2 of the other running backs in here at running back 56 and running back 78 projections on the year. This is where we can really get into the fun stuff, and this is where I feel much more comfortable with the Houston Texans and how they're going to operate. Nico Collins at the top, my wide receiver 5 in Dynasty, my wide receiver 5 in projections. You absolutely love to see it. Nico Collins with 149 targets on the year, easily would be his best year. But even last year, on only 12 games played, already racked up 100 targets. 15 games played in 2023, had 109 targets. He's had some of these injuries that he just can't play the full 17 games. They're probably one that I'm breaking the true process on. He should probably be projected, if I was sticking to it, for less than 17 games. But I'm going to put him at the 17-game pace here for now. He's had a couple of just weird minor injuries that have kept him out. Hamstring pulls, soft tissue, stuff like that, which I guess is more repeatable. But hey, we're going for 17-game pace here. Nico Collins. So 149 targets, the pace and everything gets you to, if you were to put out to the 17 games, can easily get to this number. Catch rate for Nico Collins for his last 4 years with the Texans has jumped from 55 to 56 to 73 to down to 68.7 last year. So if you kind of middle out those last 2 years, he can easily sit at a 70% catch rate. Gives him 105 targets, and the big play areas where he really loves to thrive. And CJ Stroud loves to throw the ball down the field to Nico Collins as well. Have him coming in here at 14.6 yards per reception. The last 2 years, he went from 16.2 to 14.8. So I have this number coming even down from the last 2 years that Nico Collins has played with CJ Stroud. And that still gives him 1,533 yards and 9 touchdowns through the air. He's had 8 and 7 the last 2 years in a non-17-game season. Easily can get to 9, and that is a wide receiver 5 projection for Nico Collins. One of the reasons that he is one of my most owned players in Dynasty that is of actual meaning. There's some random players that I have way too much of because they're just free everywhere. But we can then look into the wide receiver 2. And I know a lot of people are going to be very excited about the 2 Iowa State guys that they drafted this year in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. But by all accounts here, CJ Stroud has been really utilizing, and this offense has been utilizing Christian Kirk as what they consider a slot demon, has been the word that has been coming out of OTAs, training camp, minicamp, everything like that. So I have him clearly here as the wide receiver 2 for the team. I do think he's going to operate out of the slot. Stephon Diggs was in this role last year, and he was pretty good to start the season before he tore his ACL. Looking back at Christian Kirk, we got the 115 targets for him. He hasn't played the full 2 seasons. His last 2 seasons were cut short. But before that, whenever he was in 2022 and played his last 17-game season, 133 targets with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So 115 here well within his reason if he plays a full 17. And I think that with the injuries, they've been kind of longer term ones that have been kind of more weird, in my opinion. So Christian Kirk, 115 total targets on the year here at a 62.61 catch percentage. His last 3 years have been at 63.2, 67.1, and 57.4 with a career average of 64.8%. So I have it probably lower than his career average, and I could even see this one rising up higher at 72 total receptions. 11.68 yards per attempt. Looking back at those last 3 years, it's been at 13.2, 13.8, 14. I did drop this one down just because of how much I think he's going to be used inside in that slot area. Now, the Texans have also used a lot of vertical slot threat, and then they moved him around to outside and stuff. We've seen that with Tank Dell, even though, like I said, last year Tank Dell was playing more on the outside, even though you imagine him more as a slot. I think Christian Kirk will be attributed more to that slot role. So I've dropped down the yards per reception comparatively to his historicals, but that still gives him 841 yards and 5 touchdowns through the air for a wide receiver 38 mark that I think is well exceeding anything else that anybody was ranking him for in just linear rankings for redraft or anything like that. Jaden Higgins is going to be the next one. I think he's going to be playing on the other outside of Nico Collins. I have him with 75 targets, 47 catches at a 62.67% rate, 591 yards on 12.57 yards per reception, and 4 touchdowns for wide receiver 64. I do like Jalen Noel. I liked Jaden Higgins more, and I know there was a lot of very, very high guys in the industry on Jalen Noel, but I think he's going to be a slot. He's the future slot here. Christian Kirk is here on a 1-year contract. We'll see if he gets re-signed. But for right now, I just cannot project for Jalen Noel to take over the wide receiver 2 or the slot wide receiver for this team over Christian Kirk outside of injury. Just don't think it happens for Jalen Noel in year 1. But I do like the long-term future if you're to potentially step into that role. I have Tank Dell listed, but by all accounts, he's not going to play this year. So he's at 0 games listed here. Could probably just take him off the sheet, but he's still listed as I have some hope that maybe we see him at the end of the season, but I don't think that's happening. Xavier Hutchinson and Justin Watson finishing this one out. I know there's been a lot of people high on John Mechie. I honestly don't think he makes this team. They also brought in Braxton Berrios, who I believe could make this team. You could probably slot in Braxton Berrios over Justin Watson, but between those 4 guys, you probably only have space for 2 or 3 to really make the squad. These are the 2 that I have here for just the ancillary pieces, though. Tight end is going to wrap us out of this one, and it's Dalton Schultz. I think he's probably the most boring tight end in fantasy that everybody thinks about. He's just like there and a guy, but he does basically the same thing every single year. 79 total targets for Dalton Schultz on the year. That has actually dropped down the last 3 years. He's had 89, 88, 85 targets. So I have him just drop down a little bit as more work is going to wide receivers and running backs. So 79 targets for Dalton Schultz in a 17-game season at a 63.3 catch percent rate. Catch percentage for him last year was at 62.4. The year before with Stroud was at 67. So I have it bumping up just a little bit to 63.2 for 50 receptions, 10.28 yards per reception. Last year, that number was at 10. He's been in 10s for the last 4 years in a row, 10-4, 10-1, 10-8, 10 flat. So we're probably going to sit at 10 yards per reception again at 10.28, gives him 514 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. He's had touchdowns the last 4 years of 8, 5, 5, 2. We put him here at 4 touchdowns. It seems reasonable with everything else that's going around in the offense, gives him tight end 21. Just a standard run-of-the-mill average tight end that's not going to be exciting by any means, but if you just need some baseline floor production, Dalton Schultz is going to give it to you. Then you have Brevin Jordan, Luke Lachey, Cade Stover. Interesting to see how these other guys work out. Brevin Jordan currently dealing with coming back from an ACL injury, so we'll see if he's ready to start the year or not yet as well. We could probably highlight this one in orange as well just to make sure that he's actually ready to start week 1. But we'll know more about that one as we move forward through training camp and get through preseason games and everything like that. Could see more work split between any of these 3, but Dalton Schultz is going to be your tight end 1 by all accounts. That will do it for the Houston Texans, though. To recap, 569 passing attempts, 367 yards for 4,348 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 441 total rushes on the ground for 1,809 and 13. That's going to give them 1,010 plays for 40 total touchdowns. Hopefully this team can take a step forward. There's a lot of unknowns and variables, but I do believe in this team, and that defense on the other side is absolutely nasty. So I'm excited to see how this team plays out in the 2025 season. Hopefully they can win this division again. hopefully you can see your favorite team get highlighted on this series. Let me know whenever we do that, and you can yell at me for everything that I have wrong about them. I feel pretty good about the Texans other than that running back room, because the Joe Mixon experience right now is just kind of sketchy by all accounts. But for now, this is how I have it. Definitely one that I'll update as we get more information, and I will continue to update y'all with the information about more projections for more teams here over the next couple of days.